Juvin, pwede ba kami makiusap? Tanggalin nyo na muna to.
Wala namang
Napakasimple.
hindi.
Just to clarify also to the members.
Tandali lang, Juvia. The mother of all evil here is very simple. You have create and then you have an IRR. In the IRR, you authorize the BIR and the DTI to interpret or to make RMC based on the IRR. So I don't know, suddenly you gave them plenary powers to interpret. So nakitang-kita ko nito, it's a Byzantine operation. It's virtually a tautological operation, meaning to say, you derive powers by interpreting it, by giving them the powers, and they use that powers to essentially override the law. Alam mo, napakasimple lang to, Joey. Makikiusap ako sa'yo. Simple lang. Klaro na yung ating pong pinakiusap sa mga IPA, ibigay na yung forever GIE, bigyan na lang natin sila ng 10-year GIE. So hindi sila sabi na doon sa 10-year GIE, kung anik-anik pang interpretation ng VAT, zero VAT, VAT exempt, wala yun sa ano namin. Wala, kailangan doon sa gitna ng lahat ng mga negotiating. At sa pinag-away ko kayo, nasigaw-sigawan ko pa yan si Charito Plaza. Tapos bakit bigla na lang you give? Alam mo, the root of all this is really your RR, your IRR, rule-making capacity delegated to an RMC basically to interpret the create. Ganun lang. Anong rule number nun? May I ask Barcelo, what is the rule number in create law 11534? Which gives you the authority to interpret or make RMC based on the VAT provisions of the law. Wala yun eh. So doon sila nagdi-derive ng powers. So suddenly, it's the rabbit out of the box. Ako makikiusap sa iyo, Joby, pakitanggal na muna itong RR 24-2022 dahil dalawang bagay. First, the economic impact. The economic impact, you favor imports over local sourcing. Number two, impact on investments. It's sending the wrong signals to foreign investors that we keep changing the rules. And in effect, it's not even in the spirit or the letter of the law, which was already in favor of you, dahil yung Congress was definitely on the side of the DOF in the entire process of this changing the forever GIE. And number three, it is making severe cash flow constraints on our investors inside the IPAs. So you know, sinasabi ko, there are three basically arguments against this RMC 24-2022. So unless you during those negotiations with the JFCs, with the IPAs, kitang-kita mo naman na nakaside kami sa inyo, tapos biglang babaguhin nyo pa to. Samantalang very clear naman. Ang sinasabi naman namin, okay, sa inyo na GIE for 10 years, basta wala nang forever. So bakit biglang sisingitan nyo ng kung anik-anik? Samantalang very clear naman that the GIE, let's just let the transitory provision expire. And then, wag nyo na pasukan ng mga VAT interpretation in the middle. The VAT interpretation should come in doon sa mga perspective, hindi yung mga merong transitory provision. Yun doon naman talaga applicable yung mga sinasabi ni Barcelo. So, pwede ba makiusap sa inyo, napigilan muna natin to, then masakit sa tenga. Masakit sa bangs. Sa totoo lang, masakit sa bangs. It defies all logical interpretation. Because lahat ng mga tao dito, mukha dito, Barcelo, ikaw, si Ging, yan si Sharon, si Plaza, yun na laging sinasaktan namin, yun ang kontrabida ng buhay namin. So hindi masaya para sa akin na kumakampi ako kay Charito Plaza ngayon. Dahil samantalang doon ako sa inyo palagi, pero dito naman, kitang-kita naman namin na yung usapan na mawala na yung GIE forever in favor of a 10-year GIE, very clear, we should allow it to pass without all this VAT and other VAT zero rating interpretation. Yun lang pakiusap ng committee sa inyo. Very clear naman sa amin yun eh. Pwede ba yun, Juvie, dahil ikaw ng FIRB?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will revisit actually first the provision of the train law. Because even without create, the train law already amended the zero-rated VAT provision with regards to sales to RBEs inside the zone. So we look into it as well as the provisions of the create, Mr. Chair.
There is an overarching philosophy here that's being undermined, and that is we're negotiating with foreign investors, and we are reneging if essentially we are in the middle of their contracts with the Philippines. They're existing investors. We told them, okay, give up your GIE forever. We'll give you 10-year transitory. Then suddenly you impose all these other, when in fact it's very clear. Under the GIE, no national and local taxes, period. So VAT is a tax, is it? VAT is a tax. It's a value-added tax. All these other things, the zero VAT, those are. So ang akin lang dan, let's go for the jugular. The jugular is in the entire scheme of things when we were negotiating create. Nakiusap tayo kay Charito Plaza, minura-mura ko pa. Tumigil ka dyan, ang pinaglalaban mo ang nanay ng lahat ng kasamaan sa pagbubuwis. O di ba? No GIE, no GIE, no exit, no nothing until we come up with this negotiation. Okay, 10-year, forget it. And then, so the GIE is very clear. The 5% GIE in lieu of all other national and local taxes. Walang sinasabing VAT doon. Anyway, since you're no longer responding, Larry,
Your Honor.
komportable ka ba na binigyan ka ng rule-making capacity because the IR told you that you can implement laws? When in fact, it is not the intent nor the letter of create? Alam mo, binisahan nyo kami dito eh. Hindi nyo nilagay sa RR, tapos nilagay nyo lang, okay, BIR and DTI can make the RR, the RMC. Pero yung RMC nyo is definitely contrary to the spirit and the letter of the law. Hindi pa ba kailangan bang i-memorize yan? Simple. GIE for 10 years, give up GIE forever. And GIE is in lieu of other national and local taxes. So paano pumasok ang VAT sa mga tao na may GIE? Kasi ang sabi doon sa create IRR that you have the power, it is directing you to make RMC on the provisions of create. Eh syempre naman kayo, pero wala yun sa intent namin. So paano na yan? Ang trabaho ni Juby as under FIRB lalo magiging mahirap. We are promoting investment and suddenly we're reneging. Tapos kita mo naman economic arguments are very strong and potent. Number one, it is definitely favoring imports over local purchases. Number two, it is creating uncertainty. Number three, and the most basic, you're hurting people with higher negative cash flows for something we never asked them to do in the first place. Ang estimate kanina, 256 billion dun sa 1,172 enterprises, that is their CGS, that is their 256 exports. So the 12% yan, dahil hindi na sila zero-rated, eh magiging, that is at 256 times 12. So that is a negative cash flows, 256 times 0.12. So that's a 31 billion negative cash flow for these enterprises. That is power to destroy, Larry. And you're deriving it from a law that creates. So ang ayaw ko dyan, binigay nyo sa sarili nyo that capacity under the RR, the rule, the IRR of create, gives you the authority, gives you the what? The power or the whatever to create the RMCs. And then dun nyo sinimulan na baliktarin ang spirit at ang nung create law. So pwede ba? At least from the economic arguments, I think it's very clear. That should withdraw 24-2022 and all its other parents. Yun ang pakiusap ng committee. Igalang lang natin yung GIE for 10 years. Yun lang. Laman iba. Hindi ko naman sinasabing tanggalin yun. Pero yung GIE, igalang nyo for 10 years. Kasi yung GIE forever, tinanggal natin para dun. Next time kami makikipag-usap sa bayan, ay mawawala na kami ng kakayahan kasi nga we are reneging also on the negotiation with the joint foreign chambers, with the IPAs, with foreign investors in general. We told them, okay, give up your 10-year, your forever GIE. We give you 10-year GIE transitory provision. So ano na kami niyan as congressmen, as Committee on Ways and Means, we will now, yung palang sinasabi namin, hindi naman pala incumbent upon our partners like BIR and DOF and FIRB. Alam mo yung 30 billion nyo, wala pa yan sa 256 billion na investments, ha? So if you want to derive, so in short, if you derive 31 billion in dubious taxes, which you have to return anyway under a refund system, so why go through all this? When in fact, a plain vanilla approach, which is really to go after investments, which will create job support. To create one job in this country, you need 3 million. So effectively, by withdrawing 30 billion, the government will have to invest the 30 billion, create more jobs. So in short, even from that argument, ang hirap-hirap dahil you are disincentivizing 256 billion, but the government will invest 30 billion, and I don't know what multiplier I will use. The maximum is 3.4. So in short, sa 3 billion, that's not even 1/3. Kumbaga, let's face it, you allow the private sector, don't tax them. Just give them what they deserve in the first place. Or let the government get the tax and invest it. And you get a multiplier of 3.42. That's already the max. So which one will produce more jobs? Anyway, para na ako si Villanueva, nag-inspirational speech na ako. So pwede ba natin i-withdraw muna yan?
Mr. Chair, question. Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Question, Mr. Chair. Diba may authority naman yung Ways and Means to suspend?
Hindi ko alam. Alin an RMC?
Opo.
Alam mo, in other laws like universal health, yung Committee on Health was actually part of the IRR formulation. Pero dito sa mga tax law, the Committee on Ways and Means was never asked. In the past 3 years, I have been chair. Whether from oversight or from, say usually they take it, we are consulted for legislative intent. But for CREATE and all the other laws which we passed generously for DOF, we were never asked for legislative intent. Okay lang, kasi mabait tayo sa kanila. We were, good followers and we were always on their side. So I don't think we have the authority, ma'am, to negate the interpretation of the DOF. Basta wala na sa atin yan, all we can do is oversight. And this is part of our oversight.
So makikiusap na lang tayo.
Or otherwise we create a law clarifying the 10-year GIE as being in lieu of of all national and local taxes. And very clear naman yun sa ano eh. Kaso binigyan ng authority ang BIR under the IRR, then suddenly they really, the word abuse naman is very they maximize this authority under the IRR, giving them the power to interpret the create law.